Andy's trying MLM tactics to make new sales. Jim is socially terrified of the fart guy from I Love You Man. And Michael is working his angles to win over Holly. Hey everyone, I'm Chris, and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today we're looking at The Seminar. Written by Steve Healy and directed by the Temp himself, we have so much to get into, including a deeper meaning on what it means to really be a winner. So with that, let's go.
I understand nothing.
What can only be described as fan service meeting foreshadowing, we get a delightful cold opening in which David Brent and Michael Scott bump into each other outside an elevator. We'll talk about that cold opening more in the ratings though. After the credits run, we jump straight into the buzz of the day. Andy's putting on a small business seminar in an attempt to close on a few new sales. That's because his sales are the worst sales of all the salespeople and 3 named warehouse workers. The seminar isn't a bad idea though. It came to him as he sat through basically how I was able to afford most of our vacations whenever we were first starting out as a family.
Timeshares in Idaho. Cut to, I'm spending a weekend in Boise, terrible time, super lonely.
And I'm sure this is still a thing, so be weary out there, folks. When we were taking our kids to Orlando, you could get free Disney or Universal tickets if you sat through these timeshare seminars. Afterwards, they'd sit you down with an individual salesperson in a giant room and they'd pressure you for about an hour to 2 hours to purchase a timeshare. And they throw everything at you to convince you that this is what you need if you love your family. And I mean, the most pressuring sales I have ever experienced in my life. And they don't take no for an answer, and they have to have multiple people come over and sign off that you're refusing to purchase. And then they just dump you into this nondescript hallway to go collect your loot for finishing the most boring quest of your vacation. And if you're like me and have no problem disappointing the people around you, then, it's not a bad way to spend your Tuesday morning in Orlando, just to get those free theme park tickets. By the way, I've been told don't buy timeshares, but I'm sure there's way smarter people to explain why or why not to me. I'm just cheap. So Andy's idea for a seminar isn't that crazy. Anyone who might attend something like this could actually have a real business or at least a solid idea in mind that would eventually lead to some real paper pushing.
You promised us whales, these are worms.
They're not worms, Dwight. Okay? They're just people with tiny businesses. They're baby whales, which is even cuter.
Kind of like how companies market to kids in order to win their business over when they actually have money of their own to spend. So as Dwight and crew are chumming the waters here, as their guests enter, they're assessing what kind of packages they might be able to push that day by determining what kind of businesses these people have.
I was thinking we could buy up a bunch of abandoned mine shafts.
Which when this guy said this, I immediately went to just, he wants to stash his dead bodies somewhere. Like all of us thought that, right? But when I sat down to write this episode, I actually think there's a ton of uses for old mines. You could create some neat B&B experiences in some of the safer mines. You could sell them off as doomsday property for preppers. You could have them surveyed, and maybe with modern technology, maybe there's other stuff that you could mine out of it. And I even saw a startup that was proposing that you could build like somehow turbines using gravity and magnets that would, I don't know how electricity works, but they do. And they said that you can make electricity that way, which is kind of cool. I'm not saying that this guy was thinking any of that, but, it just seems that they wrote this off way too quick. This guy, though.
Credit cards.
Uh-huh.
My company will act as an intermedium for like 0.2 cents off every transaction.
I'm like...
It sounds an awful lot like what I do here every day.
Given the first few people have kind of bunk ideas, the Sales Shark staff of Dwight, Phyllis, and Stanley jump ship. This, of course, happens right after Jim decided to bow out as well as soon as this guy walked in. More on that later. This left Drew with little options on how to proceed, and he collects new acts to stand in for various sessions for the seminar. The recruiting segment does have some laughs and a little bit of heart.
That's crazy talk. I think you're great.
Then I won't let you down.
Sometimes it just takes believing in someone, and I'll say it again. Hug a Kevin is the thesis of The Office, everyone. I can't play much of a sequence though because of copyright, whatnot, but the showmanship and the message of how to stride for success is fantastic, vomit and all. Kelly is a stand-in for the non-committal Ryan, who teaches his seminar attendees that using your sexuality can be good to get ahead in the world. I think is what we're supposed to get from this. I'm not sure. And I'm really curious where Creed was actually going with this. More on that later. Creed! Meanwhile, cashing in on the viral popularity of the Words with Friends app, Aaron is in a standoff with Gabe, with the movie of the night at stake. Literally, if Words with Friends get brought up around my wife, I could see the disappointment just wash over her face. I love video games. I hate mobile games. I just can't stare at my phone for that long unless I'm watching YouTube. And that's typically while I'm doing other things, probably like you are right now. So when Words with Friends got big, I downloaded the app like everybody else did, and my wife and I played together like daily for about 3 or 4 weeks. Then I just stopped playing, and she's still bitter about it 10 years later.
Oh, Oscar.
I think playing on the discussion of what to actually watch as a couple, though, is an interesting take. It's generally something my wife and I agree on, unless it's law drama. Can't do it. Anyway, the horror movie loving Gabewad is on the hot winning streak, and Aaron's frustration fosters help from Oscar and Pam. But we do know that Gabe is smart, because he has a MacBook instead of a PC. But Oscar is also the smartest guy in the office.
Actually?
Gabe is a winner who's a loser, by the way. That'll be important for the deeper meaning. But while I think that healthy relationships should be built on real compromises, I actually think the horror genre gets a bad rap. The horror genre is a fantastic method to deliver some amazing deeper meanings in this poetically nuanced way. The suspension of disbelief gives writers the way to be able to play with the subject matter in an abstract way. It's like the same thing for sci-fi and fantasy. They just, they have different hooks.
No, not Harry Potter.
Meanwhile, Jim is peak Jim in this episode.
I had no idea you played soccer.
He still can't actually make any more money unless, I guess now it's January, so maybe he can, depending on when Dunder Mifflin's fiscal year ends. Business. They do get around this eventually with the onboarding of Lloyd Gross, but we have a ways away before we get there.
Stay out of New York, Lloyd!
For now, he's just avoiding the guy who looks irritated to be at this seminar in the first place. While all of that AM stuff is happening, Michael and Holly are spending their time getting their characters in line to attend the second half of Andy's seminar. In this episode, Steve Carell is playing Michael Scott, playing Mykonos, which is a beautiful Greek summer island getaway. And Amy Ryan is playing Hollis Flax, playing Necropolis, which is literally translates to the city of the dead, which is a nice touch showing these characters' current state of mind.
I don't know.
Back to Digital Scrabble. With the help of her friends, Erin is actually making some headway throughout the workday by not placing cow-based words on the board. In what is clearly a security violation, one of the seminar goers ends up captivating Dwight's attention, leading him and the Sharks to desire to pick it back up and to sell some paper with Andy. Then to give Daryl something to do in this episode, the writers have him drop a little bit of wisdom for Andy.
If they want to jump in, it means you're almost there. You did this. Bring it on.
Andy's response here is a moment that does kind of win me over a bit. It's a classy move, and I appreciate it.
Let me tell you what you can do with your offer to help. You can table it and offer it up another time. Just know that I really appreciate the gesture.
Thing is, selling has to be a pressure game at some point. Andy is floundering here, which leads Michael to step out and remind Andy of his job, and also that there are people who are counting on him. While Aaron is fumbling on the 1-yard line, leaving Oscar with apoplexy, Andy's closing 3 sales on the day, which, while meager, definitely swings into the positive vibes for this episode. Even the guy who has the middleman business idea bought in, so, that's interesting. The episode concludes with a sequence of Jim getting confronted by that dude he was dodging throughout the entire episode. Turns out they were school buds and Jim was kind of a D-bag to him.
My mom thinks you're too dumb to hang out with.
And this guy knows how to hold on to a grudge, which I always wondered how this situation occurred in the first place, in which this guy was in the break room and Jim wouldn't have known until he turned around. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense, but in my headcanon, I guess it does check out because this dude is 100% a psychopath. Jim's name is Boom right there on the poster, and this dude was seeking Jim out. So, better watch your back.
Watch your back, Jim. I'm just kidding.
Gabe demonstrates that he doesn't understand what a compromise actually is, and Andy wins the day by sharing a beloved DreamWorks sequel with Aaron. And the seminar wraps with Michael striking out with Holly. The seminar feels like it has a lot left on the cutting room floor. It's a funny episode with some interesting takes, and while Michael and Holly take the background plotline, I think the entire episode is actually crafted to call out this stage in their relationship. So let's get into that in the deeper meaning.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Cap.
The seminar is a pretty simple episode, and it shows the nuance of what it means to win. Now, take the easiest example, something that Jim has struggled with since the cameras started rolling, is why is the dude working at Dunder Mifflin? He's talented, he's smart, he's a gifted salesperson, super attractive, and yet he repeatedly stays in this dead-end job. Why? Well, I guess like the easy answer is the writers didn't want to write Krasinski off the show. But in universe, it's a mixture of pursuing Pam, some missteps along the way, and then like a lack of real life ambition, all of that concocted together to demonstrate this look at like the breaking point between Gen X and millennials. So here's a guy with so much potential that's just being squandered away. So seeing this guy not only reminds Jim of the terrible things he said to him as a kid, but also that he's not where he wants to be. So even though he was a winner in the 3rd grade, what's it done for him?
Where's your jetpack, Zuckerberg?
Shifting over to Erin, her and her companions are wrapping up what seems to be like a decisive victory. Pam suggests that the victory would be much sweeter if Erin wins it herself, though. Which, by the way, there are like tons of sites you could cheat with Words with Friends on. So it's not that hard to play words like this. But Erin plays another animal-based word for a low payoff and loses that lead. And while Gabe wins this battle, the nuance of what he does with that victory is a little interesting. Then to the seminar, everything is not coming up Millhouse here for Andy, except maybe the free lunch. That was a good call. But about to just call it quits with his tail between his legs, he decides to go in and take a commanding yet positive stance and ends off pulling a few little wins. They're not big, but you know, success is built on small victories and all that. But invoking the nuance of winning and losing and regretting life choices that led you up to where you are today is intended to create an energy that we would bring into what's happening with Michael and Holly. On top of the sales cycle stuff that's being referenced constantly throughout this episode, it all mimics exactly what's happening here with Michael. He's done the prospecting, and now he needs to present the offer and close the deal. This entire episode's flirting is intended to create a playful nuance that Michael can just swoop in and win, which he decidedly loses. But did he? Bringing that energy from those other storylines reinforces that winning isn't always winning, losing isn't always losing, that life is messy and gray, and that while people are often the reason why some days are just completely unbearable, people are also what can move us and motivate us to get back into the fight. Or something like that. Let's rate this thing.
This is the worst.
Right, so if you're liking this video so far, click that like button. It helps, I guess. And, you know, subscribe. That's a win for me. Maybe. So let's talk about this cold opening. If you're going to have David Brent bump into Michael Scott in the wild, this is literally the only way that I could imagine it would work. And it's quick, it's easy, and it leaves a smile on my face. Overall, I like what they did here. It's a great tribute to Michael's roots, the roots of the series itself, and they seem like they're really having fun with it. I'm gonna give this one a 4 out of 5. As for the episode, like I said during the teaser for the deeper meaning, there's something missing in this episode, and I'm betting it's on the cutting room floor, which means that this could be a good candidate for a superfan cut that we should all be anticipating in the future. I have a feeling that a lot of these bits are probably going to be elaborated on, and they wouldn't feel as rushed and choppy. Here's a great example of some rushed editing.
From here now, the first lesson that I'm gonna teach you, right, is about finding success.
I honestly laughed a lot when I was reviewing this, and I noticed quirky little things in the background here and there. It's just that the overall story feels rushed and relatively unsatisfying. It does get us closer to a Michael and Holly payoff, which is nice, and it also establishes Michael as arriving at the sage-like ability to get the best out of his people. Overall, though, I'm not a big fan of the seminar episode, and I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. But that's all I have to say about the seminar. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Join me next time when we cover the monumental episode, The Search. And forewarning, you're probably going to want to watch that one before we do the field guide for it. So with that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.